And his wife said, do you want me to call the preacher? And he said, yeah, go ahead and call that preacher. That preacher came, and this is how arrogant he was. He'd asked for the preacher because now, see, he realized that he was in some trouble. Yep. And he realized that maybe a preacher could help. Somebody and something he's never had a need for in his whole life. Now he felt that maybe he could help. His wife called that preacher, and she called him. She had to go to work. She called him back at the hospital room and said, I called the preacher. He'll be down there in a little bit. And this is what that man started doing. He started praying to a God that he never knew. Don't bring that preacher to me. I'm too sick for a preacher right now. I got too much on my mind for a preacher to come and bother me right now. Don't send that preacher to me. Before too long, the door opened and the preacher walked in. He sat down at his bedside and they talked a while. And the preacher never one time mentioned anything about salvation. Never one time mentioned anything about God. They just visited for a while. And the preacher said, I'd like to pray for you before I go. Can I do that? And he said, absolutely. And the preacher prayed and he left. And that man lay there and thought and thought and thought. And he remembered that he'd heard that same preacher preach about a man named Jesus. He remembered he heard that same preacher preach about a place called hell. And he realized that he was going to go there. And he started praying again. God, send back that preacher. Send back that preacher. That was on a Thursday. No, it was on a Friday. He prayed that Friday night. On Saturday, he knew the preacher was going to come. He just knew it, he was going to come. He would get so excited every time the door would open and somebody would come to walk into his room. He had a private room. And this man had some influence. And every time the door opened, he'd get so excited because he knew the preacher was coming back and he was going to ask that preacher about that man named Jesus. And the door would open and it'd be a nurse and he'd be disappointed. The door would open and it'd be his wife and his kids, and for the first time in his life he was a little bit disappointed to see them.